This is Start, Grow, Manage, where we help managed service providers achieve the impact, freedom, and wealth you imagined back when you started your company. At Start, Grow, Manage, our tools, practices, and processes help you engage, energize, and execute on building a business that empowers an extraordinary life. Learn more about our programs and how they can fuel your fire at startgrowmanage.com/learn more. Let's go.
Happy Monday. I don't know when this gets released, but today it's Monday and it's sunny. And I don't know, I always seem to go back to the weather. But anyway, today, hiring. This is everybody's favorite topic. So we're going to chat with Robert Goodman, who does technical hiring for MSPs and for technical groups, which I think is really interesting. But before we got there, Joe, hiring's always been perfect for you, right?
It wasn't always that way, Jeff. Remember this one time I put together this whole hiring process, and it was like this whole convoluted, you had to take tests and you had to do this whole thing. And I had this guy go through the whole thing. And this guy had every certification known to man at the time. Every Microsoft certification, Cisco, blah, 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 everything. And not only that, amazing personality to boot. Like just me, awesome, right? So gets through our whole process. We hire him. First month is awesome, right? Second month, starts showing up a little bit late, couple times here and there. Third month, goes missing for a couple days.
I guess it didn't turn out well.
Oh my goodness. And so this happens for a few months, and I'm trying to rehabilitate him and do all this because when he's there, he's great. Clients love him, but then he's gone for 2 days and I can't get my hands on the guy. And so it was just a nightmare because you had now a bunch of clients that liked the guy. Then he'd disappear. Then he'd get everybody mad. I almost lost some clients over it. And so I let him go. That was 12 years ago. At least every 3 or 4 weeks, I still get a call from a recruiter as a reference. And he always lists me as a reference, no matter what happens. No, terrible. Do not hire this person.
He's good at getting hired. Everybody has a strength. I used to be really terrible at hiring. And I remember hiring for a consulting company where you're really looking for thinkers. And first, I just have these conversations with them, and I didn't really know what I was asking. And then I would have the same sort of thing where I'd hire somebody and they'd come in, and it was a disaster. It seemed like a crapshoot. It would work fine. And sometimes, who knows what you get. I did discover a couple of things, though. I don't know if it's still like this with LinkedIn. We'd get like 400 applications for every LinkedIn job post that we put out there. And it's a lot to go through. But what we ended up doing was we put a random word in the body of the job description.
Yeah.
And then we would ask for the random word. And I would tell people in black and white, I would say, if you put the random word in the subject line of the email, I will give you an interview. And about 1% of people actually did that. That is, to me, the best test, right? It just really simply, can you read what I'm telling you to read? And then B, can you follow a super simple instruction?
Yeah. And so that's the way we used to put out our job posts is these are the things that you need to do to get interviewed. And by the way, what's your favorite ice cream? Put that in the subject line like that. And that's what made a difference in being able to filter the people that were paying attention to detail or not.
Or just paying attention. I don't even think it's paying attention to detail. It's just paying attention. The other one is, I think people make the whole capabilities question really hard. They do a lot of work to try and assess capabilities. And we always say to test for values first and foremost. But I do think that capabilities matter at some level. But what I have also discovered is that it's not actually that hard to test for capabilities. I remember hiring for an accounting firm and hiring for a bookkeeper. And we gave people a really simple bookkeeping test. And of the 1% that actually answered the ads, about 10% could actually do our simple bookkeeping test.
But here's a reality. If you're a small MSP, the thing that you care about is that they can do the culture and that they can learn, that they are learners. I'd almost rather you try to teach them something and see if they can learn it during the interview And if they can learn it, it doesn't matter what they know or they don't know. You can hire them because you can teach them. The thing is that they are fit for the culture, because if they're fit for the culture, they're in for life.
Yeah.
And so you really focus on that, really focus on getting them in with the culture. And then you worry about that other stuff later, because that stuff can be taught and can be learned. And as long as they're okay that they're coming in at an entry-level position, they're going to make a little bit less money, but you give them a good, solid career path and you say, look, if you can learn these things this fast, you'll make this much money that fast. Right? Then here's the things that you need to be able to do for me to be able to pay you that much money. And that, for the people that are really out there, they're go-givers and go-getters, they're going to go and they're going to give you everything they got, and they're going to get what they need to get for themselves.
Good. So we'll move on to having our conversation with Robert. I think it's a good chat. It talks a bit about how to make these types of hiring decisions, some of his experience with it. And it's a good thought to have somebody else help you with this process. I think especially in this technical environment where it's so hard to really find the right people. So Robert's got some great ideas, and why don't we move to him? Robert, welcome to the podcast. Why don't you take a moment to just introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about who you are.
Hey everyone, I'm Robert Goodman, and I'm the president of Technical Interviewers. I'm a recruiter that specializes in IT positions. I got my start that way because I'm a software developer myself. I've served as project manager, CTO, developer, and got into it from that angle. I came into recruiting backwards. I'm not an HR person who went into tech. I'm a tech person who went to HR. And I specialize in basically finding those people that you absolutely need.
So you were a tech person, you decided, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll just go do HR and recruit people.
There are two sort of competing stories that sort of led to the whole thing.
I love that.
We want to hear the stories.
I went to business school, and I met a lot of people who had either tech startups or alternatively had a need for sysadmins, IT people of some sort. And because they weren't from technical backgrounds themselves, or because they weren't really that great at the recruiting side of it, they kept ending up hiring these awful people, and they didn't know they were awful until they got them. It was something where I realized that I could do better and that I could help them while helping myself. And the other half of it was I was the CTO of a small startup, and I was working with a development team that one of the founders, who was not technical, had chosen for me before I even got there. And it was an adventure. You had developers that didn't really know how to code. You had IT people who didn't know how to set up the servers, and everyone else were oblivious to the fact that these people were awful. So I came to the realization that there was a gap between the people who were hiring and the people that were out there that they actually wanted. If you're trying to find anyone in IT, whether you're trying to develop a startup, whether you've got an MSP, whatever it is, it's easy to find candidates, very easy to find candidates. You don't need me to find candidates. But the problem is, for every 20 candidates, there's one good one.
You're being so...
Joe, you never had any problems hiring, right?
It's like for every 100 candidates, there's one good one.
Yeah.
So how did that show up in your business, Joe?
Oh, goodness. It's this countless hours of just interview after interview, pre-interview, just to realize, nope, wrong person, nope, wrong person, nope, wrong person, nope, wrong person. And then you get one, and then you usually get them too late. And by that, I have another offer already. So by the time you get them, you're like, now you're competing with somebody else for them because they sent you the thing 3 weeks ago, but you had to go through the 100 bad ones first. And I've tried it both ways. I'm like, I know what the problem is. The good ones are always at the end of the list. So I start at the end. Doesn't matter. And they're at the beginning.
You know what happens? You get to the end of the list and you're tired. I'm just going to take whoever shows up at this point, because there's so many. I can't take the recruiting process anymore.
Just hire someone.
Because they have a beating heart. It takes energy to go through the whole process of interview after interview to get the right person, to make sure that you're engaging with the right person. And one of the big problems I see is that people don't do it. They like have a conversation with somebody and they're like, yeah, that's pretty good. Or I've been through the top of the list and now I'm at the bottom of the list and I don't want to do this anymore. So why don't you come on board and we'll just see how it works out.
And I'll tell you, I'm a people person. So I would meet somebody who's like, oh, this guy sounds great. And then I just hire them. And then it was just a train wreck. And then after 10 of those, I was like, I'm never doing that again. So I would like
Yeah.
have these values interviews. That's how I really got started doing what we do now, is that I had to put something together to be able to pre-screen people to understand whether they're fit for our culture or not. And then you got to get so defensive about the culture that if you have to interview 100, you interview 100.
Yeah.
If you have to interview 150, it doesn't matter. It'd be nice to have somebody else to do it. That's not me.
Yeah, exactly. When I got started, my epiphany was that I had people that were not technically knowledgeable enough to know what to do. But along the road, I discovered that even the people who are knowledgeable enough, they still need someone to help out because the workload is so awful. And you just can't run a business or run your IT department and do the hiring at the same time. It's a mess. If you're a giant company like Google, maybe you can handle it because you've got an enormous HR department. You've got enough spare developers. You can put together a bunch of them that aren't doing anything and doing it in a room. But if you're, say, running a development shop or an MSP where everybody's doing something and needs to continue doing something in their deadlines, good luck spending all that time taking people off of the stuff that brings value to the company to talk with someone that may not even be worth pursuing.
Yeah, actually, that's so painful, right? So you're so busy, and then you have to go talk to a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really want to be doing this right now. I have deadlines. I have stuff that I need to get done. And
I have sales I need to close.
So what do you see in terms of people like MSPs that struggle to hire? You know, why?
There are a few things. First of all, a lot of the sort of people that end up doing the kinds of skills that an MSP needs, they often get it through a non-formal path. You see it sometimes in software developers too, where you have coders that got a CS degree from college, and then you have coders that learned themselves. But you see a much higher degree of self-learning, I find, with MSPs.
Yeah.
And the problem is that means that often some of your best candidates don't have a big diploma where they can say, see, yea, verily, I know this thing. There are credentials that people can study for. There are certs that you can get. First of all, not all the good people have those certs. And even if you do have a cert, it doesn't mean that you are actually good at doing the thing. It means you're good at passing a test, especially since a lot of these tests are automated and you're dealing with people who are technical experts. There are even bad actors that have figured out ways to cheat on the tests, which there are people that try and keep you from doing that. But considering that, again, they're technical experts, it's like hiring your dog to guard a strip of bacon. It's impossible to stop bad actors. It's impossible to stop people from doing something to jibe the test. So at the end of the day, it still gets back to having to talk with people, which is time consuming. There isn't really any way to automate it. You can put stuff on your resume, and who's going to call you on it? I once had a guy who claimed to be a Linux system administrator, and when I got him on the phone, he had never heard of Red Hat. And he didn't know.
Just to be clear to everybody, I have never administered Linux in any way, shape, or form. And I know Red Hat is, right? Just that seems like a pretty low bar, right? What did he say? Big company me say, no, I do my own system. I just program it all from scratch.
Yeah, he just went blank. He just said, Red Hat? I don't think I've ever. Oh, I said, oh, it's a Linux distribution. A distribution? Okay, thank you very much for your time.
Gotta go now.
It's almost like at that point you got to take down the fourth wall and say, so thing did you do that you're like, yeah, I'm really great at this?
Yeah, I mean, you just want to ask, but you have to wonder some of these people. I've had that. I've had people try faking it 6 ways to Sunday. I've had people try to offer me bribes. You name it and I've seen it.
Clearly you take bribes, otherwise you wouldn't be here talking with us. but, so I guess that...
Yeah, I expect my brown package of cash and unmarked bills after the show.
Not on this way. We like to do the cash and courier delivery because when we send it by courier, it just gets lost. But yeah, bribes, that's funny. Hey, just pay me to take the job. Yeah. And what's going to happen if you pay somebody to help fake your credentials so that you get the job? It doesn't seem like that's going to end very well.
Let's say you do get the job. How long do you expect that you're going to keep it? When you don't know what you're doing?
I guess you just figure it out as you're going along. I think one of the problems that MSPs have is attracting talent and creating a position that attracts them. I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or ideas around that.
There are a few things. First of all, money.
Yeah.
I know people like to act like it isn't a big thing, but it is a big thing. And there's no use pretending it isn't. In the days of salary lookups, you can't pretend that something is a good salary when it isn't. and you can't even conceal a salary anymore. You try posting a job offer without a salary attached to it in public, and you might as well not have posted it at all because people.
Well, there's actually a salary transparency law.
There is, but even in states where there isn't one, I find that it's pointless to not say it because people, if you don't put the salary, people will assume that it's bad and they just won't apply anymore. So
you know what's interesting about that, though? I want to just pause for a second. You know, what we talk about with MSPs is we talk about this idea of defining your product and being clear about your price for your product, right? And this is actually the other way around. It's like saying, I'm going to hire somebody. And what we all want to do is lowball it and get the cheapest, but then you end up not getting the right one. And then by hiding you're like turning off the wrong people. Like you are, it does seem, I'm learning from you, better off to just say, all right, just like you do with your product. When you define your price for your product, you say, this is the price I'm willing to pay for this service. Be clear about it in your own business. What's it worth to you? So that you know what you can pay and be clear about that.
Yeah. And that's definitely a factor. Money's a thing. Interesting work is also important. Talking up what you do, talking up the sort of things you can work on, the kinds of skills that you can learn that will help your career. And another part of it is making it a okay application process. Obviously, you need to find out whether the person is worth hiring or not. But by the same token, you don't want to make it awful to go through the process. By the time you give them an offer, they already hate you.
An interesting one, like just making the process more enjoyable or participatory.
I was guilty of that.
And it's tough. And the problem is that the more high level a person you're trying to hire, the harder it is to make those kinds of demands. A good example, and I know it doesn't apply as much to MSPs, but it's such a good example, I'm going to use it anyway. A good example is when people are hiring a software developer, one of the things that they may try and do is give them a coding test. It makes sense. You're hiring a coder, you want to see him code. But the problem is that, maybe a junior is going to be willing to do that. But if you've got a high-level developer who's currently at a job with a six-figure salary, asking them to code something on their own time isn't going to make them very happy. I knew of one company that actually made their senior developer candidates go through 3 separate coding challenges. And they were full things. And good luck, because the problem is if you have tons of job offers out there, you can't do a coding challenge for all of them, and you're not going to want to try. It's often trying to find a happy medium, because on the one hand, you want to make them do enough that you know that they're the right person. But by the same token, you don't want to make them go through so much work that by the time it's all said and done, they're just sick of it and they're just done with you. Part of that is doing a lot of conversation, keeping them interested, finding ways to make it easier on them. For example, going back to the coding challenge, ask them, do you have some stuff that you've coded in the past that you can show me, say on GitHub, that you can just show me to show your coding ability? Because that's a way of checking to see if you know what you're doing without making you do some work for free.
If they come back and they say, what's GitHub? Then that's right away.
Exactly. Part of it also is doing something where it's conversational, which is a lot less painful. And a lot of it is just people skills. For example, getting back to the candidates promptly, being honest about their chances, telling them right away when you have news. It's all simple stuff, but it adds up.
I think one hiring process that I looked at and that I admire is a really long and complex hiring process. What they do is they stage it really nicely so that you do one piece and then they give you information. Like they say, okay, you're out or you're in, right? And this is why, and this is what the next piece is. And they tell you up front, they say, look, this is a long process because we want to make this work. So they give you the information, they're honest, they tell you why, and then they keep weeding people out as you go through the process. Because I feel like one of the other problems I've seen with long processes, they want me, the person being recruited, not that I've ever been recruited for anything, but anyway, they want me to do a lot of work and fill out a lot of stuff up front and reveal my entire life story, like at the very beginning. And then it's like sentence 1, they're like, no, he doesn't know Red Hat, he's out. Oh, but they could have just asked me that and then saved me all of the effort on the back end. So you come up against that a second time and you're like, no, I'm not going to do that because it's time.
And also, this is a tricky thing to say to a client because you're trying to be, of course, be nice to your clients, but you have to look at your position in the industry. For example, if a hiring person says to you, Google makes you go through an umpteen step process, why can't I? And the not very nice but honest answer is you're not Google. People put up with that stuff because There's good salary, but basically because it's a career maker, because it's a prestigious position.
The brand. It's the
Yeah.
brand. They're chasing the Google brand, right?
Yeah. It's going to MIT. It's something to put on your resume. And in fact, you see a lot of people where they'll go to Google basically for long enough for it to look good on their resume, and then they'll go move to somewhere else that actually has a work-life balance. And that's not even an IT specific thing. Similar companies like that in the financial industry, the consulting industry, where they suck to work for, but people go there and put up with a bad hiring process just so that they can get their passport stamped.
Yep. AWS is like that. You get a lot of people that go to AWS. They don't want to be there, but they're there for as long as they need to be there so that it's relevant on their resume, and then they're out.
Yeah, no one ever worked for Amazon for fun.
So if you look at MSPs, right? So one of the things that you're saying is make it easy. How about benefits?
Benefits are important. They're always important now. Health, obviously, retirement stuff is great, whatever you can offer. Again, some work-life balance can go there too, especially as you go up the experience level. You have to recognize that different people want different things, and those things change as you get further along in their career. I think of it as the foosball principle. When you are hiring someone who's very young, they're interested in gee whiz fun stuff. Hey, we've got a foosball table at work. They offer free sodas. They give us pizza for late night. And it's not.
If you offer them pizza, they're in, right? They don't need money. Just give them pizza and foosball, and they're good to go.
Yeah. And when you're going for someone who's more experienced, foosball doesn't pay the mortgage. Foosball doesn't pay for your kids' braces. It goes back to different people wanting different things. And when you get more senior, you want things like the ability to do work-life balance. You want health benefits. And you also start thinking about your career instead of just the now. Is this something where I can take on some management responsibilities, for example? Is this something where I can get involved in the MSP's client's line of business so that I'm working with the client so that I'm not just some guy in a back room? You start to thinking about personal growth. You start thinking about becoming more. And that's a good way to attract people at any level, I think.
Yeah. And I like what you're saying, because what you're saying speaks to something that MSPs sometimes fall down on. I know I did in the beginning a lot, and then it took me a while to get my arms wrapped around this, which is creating that career path, right? If you don't create a career path for somebody where there's growth, what happens is that they're there for 2-3 years. You spend all this time training them, and then they're gone. So if you want them to stay, then you have to stay ahead of it. You have to see where they are, because the organization is moving as a whole. Right. So as the organization starts to expand, because you're adding more people and you're doing that stuff, you have to keep expanding the career path for people and staying in front of them. Because if you don't stay far enough ahead in front of them, then they start looking around. They're like, they're calling you.
Yeah, very much.
I think one of the challenges that small MSPs faces is it's all well and good to say that you're going to create a career path and you're going to make these things interesting and include benefits and whatnot. But a lot of them just come up against the fact that they don't have the money or the business defined well enough to be able to hire people. Do you find that, Rob?
It's about working with what you've got. For example, before I had technical interviews, before I got in recruiting, when I was a younger and much more naive developer, I worked for a company that had both developers and IT people who did many of the roles similar to what you would see with the employees of an MSP. And we were a government contractor, but not like an SEIC. We were a small one, little guys. And we would bleed IT people like clockwork, a minimum of every 2 years. And the reason why was simple. They were maintaining the server room. They were dealing with database setup. They were dealing with a lot of IT stuff that's very similar to what an MSP staff would do, but there was no room for growth. Now, what a lot of them wanted, and I know this because I was friends with some of them and I stayed in touch after they left, they wanted a lot of the kind of growth that really wasn't dependent on the company growing. For example, they would have liked more contact with the customer, more getting involved with the business as a whole, understanding the profit drivers and things like that, feeling like they're more than just a guy in a back room. And that's something that you can really do regardless of your size. And it's something I think that a lot of people fail to see. They fail to see that you've got to keep people engaged.
Yeah.
They got to feel like they're an important part of the business. And the second they start feeling like they're an insignificant part of the business, they're gone.
And I guess that's my thinking as well with small MSPs, that part of that is also just defining what the business is and being clear around, this is the business, these are our roles, this is what we do. I really like what you're saying around just giving people this more exposure to clients. But if you're making it up as you go along the whole time, then you can't really give people that kind of experience. Everything is different every time you touch it. Then everybody's in this sort of frantic state the whole time, and it's impossible to give that trajectory. Whereas, like you said, it doesn't always have to be about money at that point. Money matters, but we established that. But giving people opportunities can be opportunities within the business.
Yeah, and often with a small MSP, their size can be an asset in the sense that when you're a big company, you know, the roles are very defined. You are doing this thing, that person is doing that thing. But when you are a small company, you can have people wearing a lot of hats doing a lot of different things. You can have them get involved in stuff. You can have them go to client meetings because it's just in the office next door. You can have them get involved with putting together proposals. You can have them do all sorts of things. And that can be an asset because being flexible means letting people do things outside what they usually do. And that can be an exciting thing.
I was going to say, one of our clients experienced that, like one of their help desk guys got this big offer from this big company and he went. And then 3 months later, he called them back. He's like, I feel like a number over here. I know I'm getting like $30,000 more, but can I come back? And they took the guy back. They were so happy for him because he got all this extra money. It wasn't about the money for him. And he came back and it was like a big win for both of them. And they were able to give him a little bit more money, not what he was making, but they gave him a little bit more money because he made that choice. It was really good because now you start to see who the leaders are also in your organization. If you build the right culture, they just want to be part of it.
Rob, how do you work? What's your process?
Process starts out usually by having a fairly in-depth talk with the client. I found that very often where recruiting goes wrong is that there's a disconnect between what you think they want and what they actually do want. You want to talk in depth about what they need in terms of skills, in terms of background, that kind of thing. Then, of course, I finalize and send that out for them to review so that we're on the same page. Then I do a search pretty much on my own. And once I've got candidates, I start showing the resumes to them. And I give them also a rundown of my own personal feelings about the pluses and minuses of the candidate, because often a resume doesn't do very much. Usually do at least a short interview with the candidate before I even send a resume to the client. Because one of the things that I'm paid for is to weed out bullshit. And I can't do that until I've talked to the candidate. So if I see candidate A's resume looks good, my procedure is I talk to the candidate A, then I look at my notes, look at the resume, review the background materials, see if they're really worth considering and really aligned with what the client wants. And then if they are, I send them a resume with, again, a very short summary of no more than, say, 6 sentences of what I feel their pluses and minuses are. And if they do like them, then I schedule a virtual interview.
So from an MSP's perspective, basically you have a conversation with us about what we need, right?
Yeah.
And then you go out, you find them, you do some pre-screening, some interviewing, and then do you create that process for us, that getting in-depth process? How do you make sure that they're the right people with the right technical skills?
Usually the way I go for it is I use my own process for screening, acting as a filter to make sure that you don't talk to anyone that isn't worth talking to. Then from there, I work with the client's process if they have one, which sometimes they don't, depending on how experienced they are with hiring. Basically, I start with my process is a filter before we get to your process. And then come the interviews, and usually there's an adjustment process. I'd like to be able to say that the first round of resumes that I send to the client, that it's always perfect. They always say, these are perfect, these are exactly what I want. But that would be an utter bold-faced lie, because there's still going to be some pluses and minuses when you start doing it. It's an ongoing process. I send the resumes, they say, I'd like to talk to this person. And then based on the first round, I figure out, here's where I'm going wrong. Here's where these candidates aren't good enough. Here's where they're too good because it's something that the client doesn't really care about. So I can adjust and adjust until I get candidates that are pretty much spot on. It's a process, but it's one where I try and take as much of the time and work away from the client as possible.
So tell me, you work with a lot of MSPs, right? You've been in the trenches with MSPs. If you were to say one thing to MSPs, what would you say?
They need to know how to sell themselves, both to the client and to the candidates. Too often, MSPs act like they're a collection of bullet points of what they do. But you're never going to win that way because there are a lot of other people that bullet points. You have to impress your candidates in terms of what makes you special, and you've got to impress your clients in terms of quality.
Spot on.
hiring an MSP is an act of faith. It's like that scene in Indiana Jones where you jump off into the bottomless cavern and hope that there's really a plank that's going to catch you before you fall into the cavern. You need to persuade people that you can be relied upon. You're a good employer for the candidate, and you're a good partner for your clients.
I like the way you said that, actually. The MSPs tend to think that they're a bullet point list, right? And the problem is that they all have the same bullet point list. And it's not until you really think through that and say, all right, how is my bullet point list going to be different that you can actually sell and recruit? So awesome. Robert, anything else to add? Anything that we need to know? Anything that we left out?
No, can't think of anything. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, great chat with Robert. Joe, I think that there's a lot that we can take away from this whole how to hire and how to recruit.
That was pretty awesome. Yeah.
I think that's it for today, Joe. You want to take us out?
Remember that you are
Thanks for
loved.
joining us, and a special
We'll
thanks
see
to
you
our
around.
subscribers.
Bye,
Consider becoming
everybody.
one right now and tap into our insights and instincts to help drive your business vision and success. Remember, you didn't start your business to feel frustration. You started it for freedom. We can help you discover the impact, freedom, and wealth you always imagined. Learn more at startgrowmanage.com/learn more.